Hi everyone, I'm presenting on an article titled The Ecology of Nomadic Pastoralism by Lawrence Krader. Lawrence Krader was born in New York City on December 9th, 1919. He began his studies at the City College of New York in 1937, where he studied philosophy. He graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in 1941, and his excellence in the area of the history of philosophy won him the prestigious Ketchum Award in that field. Krader was appointed to a position at the Far Eastern Institute at the University of Washington in 1947. He later moved to Cambridge, Massachusetts to begin his doctoral studies at Harvard University in 1949. Krader would go on to teach anthropology at the University of Ohio, University of Syracuse, and City University of New York, as well as linguistics at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. From 1969 to 1972, he was the chair of the Department of Sociology and Anthropology at the University of Waterloo in Canada. His last academic appointment was as professor and director of the Institute for Ethnology at the Free Universität Berlin from 1972 to 1982. Following that, as professor emeritus, he composed more than 150 manuscripts on a wide variety of topics in philosophy, anthropology, linguistics, history, and related disciplines until his death on November 15, 1998. The article was published in the International Social Science Journal, which is a journal international in scope that bridges social science communities across disciplines and continents with a view to sharing information and debate with the widest possible audience. The International Social Science Journal has particular interest in policy-relevant questions and interdisciplinary approaches and serves as a forum for review, reflection, and discussion informed by the results of recent and ongoing research. It makes sense that this particular article, which was done by an author who has experience in a variety of related disciplines, was incorporated into this journal because the scope of it is international in terms of its focus on a variety of people throughout Eurasia and deals with a combination of disciplines including, for example, sociology and ecology. The article discusses how nomadic pastoralism functions in terms of ecology, how these groups of people interact with and survive in a given situation and certain surroundings, as well as sociology and how these people developed particular societies and took particular approaches to overcome the difficulties presented by the geography and arid environmental factors of Inner Eurasia. The thesis presented by Krader in this article is that despite the success of nomadic pastoral peoples in establishing routines and cycles that worked and ultimately made the best of difficult environmental factors in Inner Eurasia in order to survive, there are factors which cause this type of lifestyle to become less common and cause the nomadic lifestyle to shrink. According to Krader, despite the fact that the nomads have a high return for a low expenditure of labor and capital, and despite the fact that much of their territory is of limited use for anything else today, they now occupy only shrinking enclaves where once they occupied subcontinents. These nomadic pastoralists were at one time forced into this lifestyle because of the difficult environmental and geographic features they faced, but several factors forced them to become a much smaller and much less prominent group than they once were. Krader organizes the article into a number of sections. The article moves from discussing what nomads and pastoral peoples are, first of all, to how nomadic pastoralists live on the replenishable products of the herds, to how farming served as a supplementary activity, as well as other supplementary activities the nomads took part in, and finally, present day, at least as of 1959 when the article was written, as well as future prospects of nomadic pastoralists. The article covers the lifestyle of nomadic pastoralism in depth, in terms of how nomadic pastoralists were able to live and overcome the obstacles they faced in the regions of Inner Eurasia. Krader begins by defining some key concepts that he will be discussing throughout the article in the first section. He makes it clear that, contrary to what some believe, he considers nomadic pastoralism to have been developed in the steppes of interior Asia at the beginning of the first millennium BC by the Iranian Scyths. He defines nomadism as a cyclical or rhythmic movement. People who have a fixed round of movement having a definite endpoint to their movements and a point of return. So nomadism is not just random movement or non-cyclical movement. They have a destination point in mind for a particular reason and then a point of return that they will come back to. Pastoral peoples, according to Krader, are those who are dependent chiefly on their herds of domesticated stock for subsistence, who as a rule live on the replenishable products of the herds, milk, blood, wool, and they exchange the stock and its products while it is still on the hoof for the products of farmers and townsmen. In other words, the herd, the animals they depend on, they're not just killed for food or for clothing. They continuously are producing goods that are used by the pastoral people. Interestingly, in terms of ecology, the mode of subsistence of the herdsman combines both symbiotic and parasitic relationships with the environment. So the relationship between the herds and the herdsmen is, according to Krader, symbiotic, where the herds supply the herdsmen with transport, milk, hides, wool, meat, goods that can be exchanged, and in return, the herdsmen protect the herds from predatory animals, winter storms, whatever it might be. The two work together to provide something for each other. However, both, when we talk about herds and herdsmen, depend on the supply of grasses, water, but don't do anything to replenish those supplies, which makes that a parasitic relationship. So the ecology of nomadic pastoralism, which ultimately the title of this paper, is interesting in that there's both symbiotic relationships between herd and herdsmen and with the environment, but also parasitic ones that have a negative effect on the environment. One of the key reasons for the necessity of nomadic pastoralism for these peoples is the arid zone of the old world that these people inhabited. The mean annual precipitation within this zone is less than 300 millimeters, meaning there is constant danger of water scarcity and drought, and many of the waterways are seasonal and dry up in the summer. Therefore, the waterways could not be relied upon for much, including transport and agriculture, were difficult to rely on in these arid lands. When the waterways were going to dry up, when growing season was over, the nomadic pastoralists would leave and go somewhere where they would be able to have resources they needed to survive, care for the herd. So as a result of this move, the water sources would then be reshaped when they weren't being used. The grasses, which the herd depended on, would return annually, and the nomadic pastoralists could then return with their herd to utilize those resources until once again the season was over, and they would have to move. So you can see this cyclical and seasonal pattern is what nomadic pastoralists had to live by in order to survive and make sure they were taking care for their herd, which they relied on to be sustained. In terms of some supplementary activity that Krader talks about that nomadic pastoralists had to or used to supplement the herding and the animal products that they used, they did use agriculture. So agriculture was used as a supplementary activity for these nomadic pastoralists, aside from herds and animal products that they ultimately relied on. They weren't farmers that relied on agricultural all the time or stayed in one place farming for survival. Really, agriculture for these nomadic pastoralists was limited. They had very simple tools to do the job, tended to plant more simple crops like wheat, peas, didn't really plant crops like rye or rice. So they did use some simple agriculture to supplement their main activities. Other supplementary activities of the nomads included hunting. That would have been done primarily by males for meat, for hides, for skins. Fishing was a minor supplementary activity, mostly because of the fact that there were few year-round water places that they could do fishing in these arid zones. So it was only those who really had access to places where you could fish that they would do that. And finally, another thing Krader mentioned that was interesting was pig raising, which was not a significant supplementary activity for a couple different reasons. One being that the majority of the nomads were Islamic, which means that the pig to them was viewed basically as abhorrent. So they wouldn't have used it because of that reason. And also the pig could not be made to conform to the nomadic pattern of the pastoralists, so it wouldn't have done that much good for them. So as far as supplementary activity to animal herding, tended to be agriculture, hunting, and in some cases fishing, if that was something that was available. In terms of the present day, based on when this article was written, and the future of nomadic pastoralists, basically the Krader talks about how nomadic pastoralism had been shrinking in scope when he was writing this article for a couple reasons. One being they face greater competition for land with farmers, because even though most of the land occupied by herdsmen was unfavorable to farming, there were pastoral territories that bordered farming territory that farmers were expanding into. In addition, there was considerable pressure placed on nomadic pastoralists by central governments of various Asian nations, trying to persuade them to settle down, because for a nation, for a state, it's more advantageous for a population to be fixed in terms of things like collecting taxes, education. Having populations constantly moving around isn't as advantageous for a nation state. So as a result of the changing world, the numbers and the culture of the nomads were certainly affected and occupied much smaller regions than they once did. This article was an interesting read in terms of getting a more in-depth look at how the nomadic pastoralists lived, what challenges they faced. It fit in well with the articles we read in the previous week that looked at the geography of Inner Eurasia. How did that make it difficult for agriculture to be successful, which led to the nomadic lifestyle for these people to survive these difficult climates, these arid climates. Provides more detail to the challenges posed to those living in Inner Eurasia and what they had to do to overcome those challenges, as well as how the relationship between the people and the environment, in this difficult environment, worked. It also provided some interesting detail for why the population of nomads decreased and how new challenges ultimately caused the regions occupied by nomads to shrink due to a variety of factors. The article provided a lot of great background information about Inner Eurasia and the areas of interest to us as we continue to study the Silk Roads. And it, again, tied in really well with the stuff we read last week about the geography of this location of the Inner Eurasia that we'll be looking at this semester, and really gives us an understanding of why people living in these regions lived as they did and what type of lifestyle they lived. So I really did enjoy reading it. Got a lot out of it in terms of understanding the region that we're talking about. So thank you guys for watching. Please post any comments, any questions you have in the discussion board, and I look forward to discussing this article with you, as well as the other articles for the week, and I hope you all have a great week. Thank you.